Hello everyone, welcome to Homeschool Autism Life. My name is Jamie and this week's video is a continuation of my open collaboration, there we are, with Jessica from the Waldock Way and Abby from Rooted in Rest. And they have welcomed a whole bunch of us homeschool mamas to share what our homeschool looks like, give you a sneak peek into what it looks like, and just show how vastly different everyone homeschools. And there's no right or wrong to it. It's just what works for your family, and that's what makes homeschool epic and awesome, because we can do that. We can come alongside our kids and meet their needs where they are. So this week's video is asking the question, what is your favorite subject? And this one I thought would be kind of funny to start out with what I thought would be my favorite subject to teach if I had to homeschool or be a teacher or whatever. I thought originally my favorite subject to teach would be art. I love painting, I love drawing, I love all things that you can create. That is my, if I could do that all the time, I would be the happiest person in the world. Unfortunately, life doesn't allow for that. But what ended up happening was that my daughter, specifically my other daughter, I have two daughters who are interested in art. My son tolerates it. He tolerates me doing art with him. But my two daughters have vastly different personalities. So my youngest daughter loves to make a mess. Mess. And that's not my forte. I am not a huge fan of messes, especially when it doesn't have to be. Like, do you have to go crazy? If we had like a garage or something like that where I could just let them go and not worry about the mess, that might be something. But we just have our very small table in our very busy dining room, and I'm like, well, why are you making messes? And then I have another daughter, my eldest daughter, who she gets to a point where it doesn't turn out the way she has it in her head, and she just crumples it all up and then doesn't want, she's in tears, she's so frustrated, and I'm like, whoa, everything's okay, do you want to try again? She's like, no, and she just gives up. So art is not my favorite subject to teach. What is my favorite subject to teach is history. Now, if you knew me in high school, you would probably laugh that that is my favorite subject to teach, because I found it very boring. It was taught in such a boring way. Names, facts, and it wasn't engaging at all. Until I got out of high school and I started watching documentaries and stuff like that, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is so amazing. So the first reason why I love teaching history is because I can see God's fingerprints, or how he has created the world and how people have made choices and done things along the way that lead to a very clear picture of how, the things that he says in his words are true and are factual. So when we tend to go our own way as human beings, we tend to make a mess. And there are so many things that go wrong and so many things that cause other people pain. And when we choose to go the right way, the way God asks us to, it makes such a big difference. And so the stories of the Bible kind of came alive, and at the same time really showed me, especially when COVID land was happening and all of those other things, the more history I got into, the more I realized human beings haven't changed at all. We sometimes look at our world and go, oh my goodness, it's way worse, and I wish I could go back to such and such a time. And you're like, no, it really hasn't changed. It really hasn't. And so there was a certain peace and serenity to me when I realized just how much we hadn't changed. And it like God's been there the whole time, and if he's been there then, he is here now. And so that's one of the main reasons why I love teaching history, is because those stories come alive and you actually understand the interplay between people it's not just names and dates, it's how did that person feel when they were faced with this. And you're like, okay, I understand that because we were faced with this. Number 2 is epic and awesome way to teach your kids choices equal consequences. This is my mantra as a mom. My kids do this whole thing where I'm like, choices equal no consequences. But I truly, truly want to instill in them that they are not victims. They are not victims. When things happen that is beyond their control, they still have choices available to them. How they choose to respond is within their control. And so those things, I've seen too many people in my own past, in my own life, who they're like, it happened and I have no choice in the matter, and this is just my life and it sucks. And I'm like, I reject that. I reject it on the grounds of God has given us a whole bunch of different tools at our disposal, the fruits of the Spirit being a big, big one of them, that we can directly affect what happens to us. And then the choices that we make also are affected by that. And history is so great at teaching that lesson, because you're suddenly going, okay, if so-and-so didn't do this, then the consequences would have looked so much different. Or if they had chosen to do this instead, listen to God instead, this is what would have happened. And when you can see, because you're learning from history, you have hindsight. You have hindsight. And so that's wonderful lessons wonderful to take into your own life and go, I want them to learn how to pause. When they have a choice to make, pause, pray, seek God, ask him where he wants them to go, so that the consequences of that decision, sometimes they aren't fun in the moment. Like when we had something happen at the school and God said, you are going to homeschool. I wasn't comfortable with that at all. I was so overwhelmed. I was very much like Moses going, you picked the wrong person, God. And yet looking back on it now, I go, that was exactly where I needed to be. And if I had disobeyed and tried to put him in this school or that school or somewhere else, I would have missed the joy and the wonderful fulfillment I have in this job. I've never had a more fulfilling job, even getting paid. So it's things like that that really bring the choices equals consequence and following God's will to life. And history teaches that in such direct, amazing ways. The last thing is more of a bonus. I did a lot of research once I realized that I liked history. I did a lot of research into our own family roots, my roots and my husband's roots. And when we start talking about, we are learning about Europe, we are entirely European. Surprise! But when we started talking about that, when we started talking about history and how our direct family ancestors were affected by things like the War of Independence down in the States, the persecution in Russia, all of these things, we did this. And it was just a little project where we talked about, these are the ancestors from Russia. And they eventually, this lady, her ancestry were on the Oregon Trail. And so you got to see where these people were brought from, Peking, where they were brought from, where did they go, and how did God bring all those people together? This is the Defoe family. They were the one that were affected by the War of Independence, and the choices that they made led them to becoming United Empire Loyalists, and that is why we are Canadian. And so it brings history alive when you can say this person in your family made this choice because of this, that, or the other reason, and that's why you're Canadian. Where else? My French relatives came during when Canada wasn't even a country yet. It was a part of the British colony, and he came to help them with the Iroquois nation who was fighting for their land and their freedom. So we talked about the fur trappers. He became a fur trapper, and we've been in Canada for forever. And so, excuse me, though, Second World War, that was one of the when we talked about the Second World War, I could say, this is your family member who is in the First World War. So all of these people, when you explain that in such a, sorry, this is gonna fall. When you explain it in such a personal way, it takes the names and dates and the story of history and makes it personal to your kids. And when they realized some of this, then it was like, oh, okay, this actually affected somebody in my family. I highly, if you have even a smidgen of time to, if you know of anyone in your family, to do that family history and look backwards in time to see what was affected. And it changes so much. It brings the story of history alive. And the other great thing about it is that going through all of those different family members, we have a map that we kind of traced their steps and how those steps interacted for those couples to meet. And that as those couples, from Russia going down and being immigrants to Mexico, and then that ancestry, that wing of ancestry ending up in Canada in order for my husband and me to meet in Canada and get married. It just shows God's interweaving of the story, and it all had to be at the right time and in the right moment. And I truly, it changes something in you and your kids when you suddenly are like, oh, God didn't have, this didn't happen by accident. It would be very hard for all of these people to meet in these exact peaking in the exact right moment in order for me to be alive or for my kids to be alive. And it takes such a random random things. For my life, my Dutch ancestors and my French ancestors, so those are the two big groups of my family, they're close together in Europe. They're absolutely close together in Europe. But my French relatives, they were in the New World long time ago. And my Dutch relatives didn't come until the Second World War. It's amazing. It's amazing to see those stories and the intertwining of God's will in our lives. And I just love that. So history is my favorite. History is my favorite for so many different reasons. I hope if you're somebody who's like, history, I hope that this inspires you. I hope that you're like, okay, I get it. Even if you can't do the family history component, because it does require a lot of research and not everyone is into that, just look for living books that talk about the actual story of the people who were actually there living it, because the names and facts, it doesn't tell the whole story. It tells just a small fraction, and the richness of history is in those stories of what it was like to live through the War of Independence, what it was like to be persecuted and no country being willing to take you as a refugee. Like all of those things, World War II, World War I, what did it look like to actually live in those trenches? And it takes those names and dates and turns it on its head. And suddenly you're like, okay, this is the story of John, who was in the middle of the war, and this is what he saw, and this is what it looked like for him, and this is why he came home broken. So I hope that helps inspire you. Please feel free to look down below. There's going to be a link to all the other mamas who are sharing their favorite subjects to teach, and I hope that you are inspired by all of the mamas who share. We'll talk to you later. Bye.